Hi, I'm author Stephen McGee, and I wrote the book Health Forensics and Hypoxia, Mental Illness, and Chronic Fatigue. That's me. I'm standing on top of the world's largest telescopes at the top of Mauna Kea on the island of Hawaii, and that's the Subaru telescope. We're here to take a look into toxic altitude. That's me. That's the world's largest telescope, the WM Observatory at the top of Mauna Kea in Hawaii. And today we're going to take a little look into shift work disorder. So this was something I never heard about until I got the medical diagnosis, and then it became very significant in my life. So I used to do shift work. I did 3 years of night shift work on top of Mauna Kea in Hawaii. And it led to me getting a diagnosis from the medical profession of shift work disorder. So let's see what shift work disorder is all about. So shift work disorder is also known as shift work sleep disorder. The definition of shift work is any shift that falls outside of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you are working after 6 p.m. or before 6 a.m., you are classed as a shift worker. You may develop shift work disorder, which is a circadian rhythm disorder. There are different types of these disorders. Circadian rhythm disorder, delayed and advanced sleep-wake phase disorder, irregular sleep-wake rhythm disorder, jet lag. So most aircrew and frequent travelers will recognize the last one. So jet lag is a shift work disorder. So a lot of pilots and cabin crew suffer from that. So they may well end up with a shift work disorder diagnosis. So let's just talk a little bit about my night shift work up here, because my night shifts were very, very unusual. And they started before sunset and they finished after sunrise. And anyone who understands sunsets and sunrises realizes that in winter the night is very, very long. So the sunset happens much earlier and the sunrise happens much later. So you end up with a very, very long day when you're working nights on a night shift that is going from sunset to sunrise. So these night shifts for me, typically in the summertime, they may be like about 14 hours long. Maybe in the wintertime, they may extend up to like 18 hours long. So if you do the maths, you'll realize there isn't enough time for 8 hours of sleep between them. And then they would get extended if somebody called in sick, because the WM Observatory is poorly staffed when I worked there. There was nobody to cover for sickness, so all the management team do is they extend your shift. So you end up doing double night shifts. So you can be on the mountains. Typically, if everything's going okay, you're doing like a week on and a week off. If somebody calls in sick, you may be doing 2 weeks on. So it's a pretty tough environment. It's 13,800 feet, 40% less oxygen. This guy's taking medical oxygen to stay there without a doctor's prescription. And he's also taking the company-supplied over-the-counter drugs to stay there to treat his medical conditions, which are showing up because the environment is toxic to the human. So this is a sea level adapted human, and he's at very high altitude. So he's getting sick at very high altitude, as are most of the other workers that work there. So the night shifts on top of all these exposures just make you super, super sick. And anyone who's done night shifts will tell you that the worst part of the night shift is the early morning hours. So after midnight until you go to bed, it just really sucks. It's just an absolutely awful job. I have to say this was the job that pretty much ended my career. Life was a struggle after doing this job. So my career went on a downward spiral after working at this facility because of the sickness this facility induced into me. So let's have a little look at the kinds of sickness that are known to occur. So there are different types of sleep disorders that are seen. So we have insomnia, excessive sleepiness while awake, and recurring sleep loss. So I had all of those, and this job was inducing them into me with its long work hours. I should mention that I was also sleeping at 9,200 feet at a place called Halipahaku. It's on the mountain. So when you go to the telescopes, you'll drive past Halipahaku. It's a hotel for the workers. It's at 9,200 feet. And the problem with that is at 9,200 feet, central sleep apnea starts occurring in people that sleep there. So you get central sleep apnea sleeping at Halipahaku on Mauna Kea. So I had all these. These were all coming out of the job, and I was running down like a battery. So I eventually got smart and I left. So I will say that, I did develop a knee tumor in my right knee. I had an accident at work. I fell down and smashed my knees into a metal grating in like the first year that I worked there. And then the last year that I worked there, I developed a tumor in my right knee and had to have it removed, and that triggered harassment from the management team, and they were taking me into these surprise voluntary resignation meetings. So it was all very shady. My last 6 months or so at the WMCAC Observatory, it was all a very abusive workplace environment for me. The last 6 months that I worked there, that abuse was coming from this toxic lifestyle in conjunction with the workplace harassment that was coming from the management team, because I'd taken time off to have a tumor removed from my knee, which could have killed me had it stayed in there, and I probably would have lost my leg. So I needed the surgery, there's no doubts about that. So I'm not too sure what kind of mentality was going through the minds of the management team to take me into management meetings and harass me for my voluntary resignation, when all I'd done was earn sick time to have a tumor removed from my knee. So that's what's going on at the WMCAC Observatory with their sick time and their employees. So if you work there, be very, very careful about taking sick time, because you may start getting taken into these harassment meetings that I experienced. So let's see, we're going to progress on through these conditions, and these can lead to the following symptoms: fatigue, malaise, attention problems, concentration problems, memory impairment, mood disturbance, irritability, hyperactivity. Impulsivity, aggression, behavioral problems, reduced motivation, energy problems, lack of initiative, errors, accidents, sleep dissatisfaction, sleep disorders, mental health disorders, illnesses, and diseases. So that pretty much covers this book: hypoxia, mental illness, and chronic fatigue. So that's exactly what happened to me. So this list is a good description of what happened to me in this job and subsequent to doing this job. So the job is toxic. There's absolutely no doubts about this job being toxic. And the fact that they have to take drugs to stay there tells you it's toxic. And the fact that they have to take medical oxygen without a medical prescription from a doctor tells you that they're sick, these people on this mountain. And as I discovered when I did the night shift is probably the most toxic job in the company. And there's some strange things going on in these night shift workers. I have another video online that talks about that, but all I can say is the night shift workers were an unusual bunch of people. It's a very small group at the WMCAC Observatory. It's basically, from my memories, it was about a team of about 8 night shift workers, and most of them were displaying strange issues. Let's just leave it at that. Strange issues in the night shift workers at the WMCAC Observatory. So, yeah, I saw a lot of this in myself, and I also saw it in the other workers. So it leads on to hypoxia, mental illness, and chronic fatigue if you get a bad dose of it, which I did. So the tumor in my knee was just a sign of the toxic environment I was in. You know, kind of you put the human in a toxic environment. It's only a matter of time before they start growing tumors. So shift work disorder causes significant issues with falling asleep, staying asleep, and sleeping when desired, which brings on fatigue and illness. So again, that's this book, Hypoxia, Mental Illness and Chronic Fatigue. And the illness in me was a knee tumor that I had to get surgically removed, which triggered workplace harassment. And the only thing I'd done was use my earned sick time, which I had earned. I didn't take any other form of time off. I had a great history of not using my sick time. But because I had to take several weeks to have this knee tumor removed and recover from it, the WMCAC Observatories just used that as a license to take me into harassment meetings. So be very, very careful with the WMCAC Observatory. So let's wrap this up. My employer never told me about shift work disorder. So I want to just talk a little bit about this. So my employer never told me about shift work disorder. So have you ever been told, if you're a night shift worker, has your employer ever told you that there's a medical condition called shift work disorder? Probably not. They don't want you to know. So just be very careful that this is a medical condition. You can put this in on the internet, shift work disorder, and it'll bring up all kinds of medical articles and medical research on the subject. And this is a research facility. So this WMCAC Observatory I'm standing on top of is a research facility. And one of the interesting things about the Keck Foundation that funded the construction of this is they are a medical research company. And they're not telling the workers about shift work disorder. It's very laughable. So the other thing is, the other funding for this facility, this WMCAC Observatory, comes from NASA. They know all about shift work disorder. And it also comes from the University of California. They know all about shift work disorder. They're a medical research company. And I believe it's Caltech. Caltech may put some funding into this. I can guarantee you they know about shift work disorder. But the people that don't know about shift work disorder are the shift workers who are working for them. So there's a very big disconnect between the research field and what they tell their staff. And the reality is, who would want to do night shift work if they were told at the outset they may go on to develop the medical condition of shift work disorder? So I'm going to let you ponder the ethics surrounding not informing night shift workers about shift work disorder, and then these so-called research institutions that fund these astronomical facilities who know all about shift work disorder, running a night shift that is so toxic it induces disease into people. And I'm not the only one that's developed disease at the WMCAC Observatory. There are others. So I'll let you figure out who the others are. I'm not going to tell you. And I hope that this has brought you up to speed on what shift work disorder is. If you want to find out more information on shift work disorder, you'll find it in Toxic Altitude. Toxic Altitude is a discussion of the sickness that occurs in these workers in the scientific research field above the clouds atop these mountains. And this is a high radiation environment, so they're working in a high radiation environment. It comes from space, that's why the telescopes are there. So all these telescopes are studying the high radiation environment from space. And it induces radiation sickness into these people, as well as the shift work disorder. So you want to find out more about long-term effects. So Toxic Altitude talks about what happens to these workers, and then hypoxia, mental illness, and chronic fatigue is all about the long-term health effects. So you want to find out more about the long-term health effects that these workers can go into with too much of this toxic altitude. You'll find it in here. Health forensics is a general discussion on the environment and environmental factors that make people sick. And there's a little bit of talk about altitude sickness in this book too. So that's the 3 books. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I wish you the very best of health. Please subscribe and please like the video. Thank you.